Dudes with wrenches here.
Hey guys, I'm Jason with AMD, and you're watching the Get.Out.N.Drive podcast. Check this out.
You're listening to the Get.Out.N.Drive podcast, fueled by AMD, with your hosts, John, Custom Car Nerd Meyer, and Jason, Old Car Guy Car. We'll be bringing you gearheads everything you never wanted to know about cars and why they should be on the road and not in your garage. Are you ready to get out and drive?
Welcome back to the Get Out and Drive podcast, fueled by AMD, and I'm pretty excited to bring back a topic that we were talking about in one of our previous episodes recently about conspiracies and government conspiracies and how we feel like, you know, things are kind of coming down on us.
Oh, hell yeah.
But because we talk about that stuff and we encourage you guys, depending on the platform that you're watching this on, we encourage you to reach out to us either in the chat, via email, DMs, whatever that happens to be, because sometimes people have something to add to it because, you know, we're just simply not smart enough to tackle everything, nor are we even that organized. And when we have some great people and some great fans who say, hey, this is something you should consider. I had a buddy of mine who we've been kind of in communique for several years now, and he's done very well on social media under the name of Dudes with Wrenches here. Sorry, not here. But James Thomason is here with us, and he reached out with a very long email, and I'm not criticizing that, but it was informative. He had lots of optional ways of looking at things and great ideas, and I want to welcome James to the Get Out and Drive podcast. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump right into this, if you guys are listening to us on a platform that doesn't allow comments and suggestions, just a reminder, you can head over to Get.Out.N.Drive.com, and if you scroll down to the very bottom of the screen, there's a listener hotline there. You can click on it, you can record a message, and let us know either where you're listening from, an idea for the show, or maybe tell us how bad we did, wrong information, maybe add some information to what we have, and you can send that off to us. And we do listen to every single one. We get several a week, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with. But nevertheless, this episode is based on information that came back to us from one of you guys. So James, we appreciate that. And tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what it is you do on social media.
Well, what I do on social media hasn't been much in a while. You could almost say retired, if you will. I've chosen family over social media because anybody that does it regularly, you realize it can be kind of a slog, if you will, and it can take a lot of your time that you may or may not have. And for me, I have a daughter that just graduated and a son that's just starting to drive, and I had to get back in the groove of just spending time with family, so I went that direction over social media. But before that, we did get lucky, if you will, and we got on the shorts bandwagon when it was really rolling, and we did pretty well on YouTube for a while, and it just kind of became a relentless grind, if you will. And like I said, it just kind of took too much time to where we had to just step away. We'd like to come back when the time is right. So for right now, we're more just a viewer than a creator at this point, but that's kind of where we're at.
We get lots of information from a lot of people because Jason and I try and take a topic and we try and do a little bit of background on it and we just run.
We beat it. That's what we do. We beat it to death.
That is exactly right. I saw him. I thought something was crazy was going down. But I know we take a topic and we generally beat it to death. But always another set of eyes, another set of ears and things. And we love having listeners, period. But we love, we love having listeners that'll respond and listening to your views and everything on something that I thought was an idea that was in my head, and actually going through your head. That's fantastic, and I'm glad for you replying with what you thought was more of an in-depth view on what we were talking about.
And a lot of times too, John, one of the things that when John invited me to be a co-host on the podcast was we were hoping that we would have different opinions or different sides of different things. And sometimes we do, but in a lot of cases, we think the same. So sometimes to put ideas together and talk about a conversation, we tend to lean heavily in one side. And it's not necessarily fair to hear everything. But when you reached out, for you guys that don't know, and this is the first episode that you're catching about this whole conspiracy theory and whatnot. The last episode, we talked about the strange coincidences that happen with salvage yards just randomly burning down, and the fact that we felt that there was some talk that the government was behind burning these things down so that you and I, the guys who are in the automotive trade or industry, or who just simply wanted to keep our older vehicles going, couldn't, because they're getting rid of those older parts and blah, blah, blah. It went in depth. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, please go back and listen to that one as well, because we covered a lot of great topics. James, when you reached out, you had a couple of things that you wanted to enlighten us with. And we're going to kind of break this down into paragraphs or partial parts of that email. The first thing that you had mentioned was the idea of comparing these salvage yards to, say, a heirloom family farm. Explain to us a little bit about where you were headed with that, and how that relates to the whole maybe conspiracy sort of thing.
So for me, I'm from Iowa, so we get to watch a lot of family farms. I came from a family farm, and sadly, I got to watch a family farm get pulled apart. And I watch it in a lot of communities and a lot of friends. You know, it's just kind of those things that generationally, your grandfather's grandfather starts something, and he builds something off the sweat of his brow. And I do believe that salvage yards are something very similar. So when you have a salvage yard that's started by somebody way in the past, it does have to get handed down to keep existing. So, you know, all this stuff will outlive all of us at the end of the day. So with that in mind, you have to think, okay, I start something, the next generation is going to take it on, the next generation is going to take it on. And with the comparison to family farming, it doesn't always mean the next generation wants to be a farmer. It doesn't mean that they want to take on the task of tilling the land and, you know, fertilizing the soil and making that their thing. There is passion and pride to everything. And I think at a certain point, you know, somebody wants to just maybe be a dentist, and, you know, and that's where it lands. So that's kind of where I was leading into with this, comparing it to family farm, because for me personally, I do see that a lot when you talk about a generational thing that consumes multiple generations of a family and outlives the people that do the task or enjoy what it is.
Yeah, because who wants to like, I commend farmers. Don't get me wrong. I love you guys. They are the backbone of America, the backbone of Canada. You know, they do everything that they do. They are up at the crack of dawn. They work 14, 16-hour days, rain or they're just, every time their eyes are awake, they're working hard. And unfortunately, that is not bred into the next generation sometimes. We see kids today who just simply do not want to work. There are very rare exceptions of kids who want to work and do well. But it's hard to find kids that want to work and do it for the minimum wage. They're doing the minimum effort. Farming is far from that.
And I think there's something also to speak of. You know, we all want to have this great idea, and it's almost the worst idea humanity does it to itself in a while. Is we always want to say the next generation, I want them to have more. I want them to have better. You know, I want to do right by my kids, you know, that whole idea. And with farmers and anything that's a multi-generation thing, you can't do anything better than what you're currently doing. You know, it's just a steady stream, and it's a constant flow. You can't give more than what you're currently doing. You can work harder to try to, but then essentially we all have that same epiphany of just like, well, did I just spoil my kids into not working as hard as I'm currently working to provide for them? So it kind of speaks to that note too.
Yeah, I see that 100%, and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and specifically grew up Italian, and everybody in my family had a restaurant. All my family and neighbors and everybody had a restaurant, and as things go, you go down the line, and third, fourth, fifth generation, people say, "Well, I don't feel like doing that." It's not their responsibility to be given that, and they feel slighted if they don't get to choose what they want to do. And I feel exactly what you're saying with the conspiracy and the automotive junkyards and things. I don't feel I want to grow up in a junkyard that my uncle great grandfather started, and I'm third generation. I don't have any reason to keep doing this. I want to scrap everything, sell everything to the first person that waves 2 nickels at me.
Well,
I see it a lot.
Yeah, and it's dirty work. Even like, there's a lot more family business out there, but I mean, if we're comparing the salvage yard and farms, it's dirty business. Nobody wants to work their guts out for 80 hours a week just to break even at the end of the year. You want to be able to come ahead. Not every salvage yard, not every farm are driving $100,000 pickup trucks, right? They're a lot of them are struggling to get by. In fact, a lot of them, they're going behind. They're borrowing money to grow the crop this year, and if the weather's shit, still got to pay the money back. So I see where you're going with this, and it's something that I would never. Of course, I didn't grow up farming. I didn't grow up into that. But to see those or to hear those different views puts a lot of that into perspective. So what is this next generation doing once they receive this next generational gift?
Well, and I think you can speak to that on a lot of notes, like we just said. The next generation may not want to work as hard as the first generation. They may want to have more things. They might want to drive that new truck, live in that big house. And it only provides so much for so many people. And the more generations you span that asset out and those assets in that salvage yard or that farm, they get thin. So at a certain point, it's only getting worse and worse for the next generation. So it's compounding on itself on just the assets don't have the same value, or we just can't spread them among that many people and create wealth across multiple generations. So then in turn, you have your generational gaps as well. So, grandpa, he's going to live for 80 years. So the next generation after him, they may never get to partake in the actual assets at a positive note. And then the next generation after them may, because, you didn't get to partake in it until he was gone. And then you could take what he was taking from the cut, and then it just keeps going on from there. And like I said, that goes back to talking about, farms, if you will. But I mean, that nonstop just working to make a dime. We can all look at cars and parts and go, I have all this value, right? But somebody has to want to buy it. And on top of that, you have to sell it. So you have to get the right people in the right places. That all takes time, effort, energy. And sometimes that becomes its own problem. I have a lot of valuable things, and sometimes I wish I could sell them, but I know I don't have the patience to deal with the people to get rid of them. And when you have big, large salvage yards, and we've all been to them, we've all been to the pick parts, we've all been to these places, unless they have a good system where they're just turning and burning parts and they don't care what those parts are, they get stuck in the idea that they have this one thing that may be really valuable, but unless they're willing to just turn and burn and get rid of it, they can't bring the next thing in. And anytime you have these large yards like you see out there, they're large for a reason in my mind, because they're not selling those unique parts. They're holding out for that certain person, that certain price. And I think that ultimately affects them negatively.
Yeah, I see that type of stuff with racetracks. I see that type of stuff happening with salvage yards, and I see it happening with encroaching neighborhoods, because when the salvage yard was a farm and it was connected to a farm or whatever, it was out in the middle of nowhere, and the middle of nowhere is now a suburb.
Yep.
And you become a problem. You're holding an oily car and some kind of EPA mess, and the city or next town over used to be a long ways away. Now it's in your backyard, and those people want to be out in the country, but they don't want to smell a horse's butt, and they want to say, I don't want this farm next to me, and they regulate it out of existence. Same thing happens with racetracks. Same thing happens with car salvage yards. All that stuff. The whole entire cities around that used to be in the middle of nowhere are now in their backyard, and I think EPA gets involved, and all sorts of things get involved, in money and people's time and regulations and all that stuff. If you set it on fire, they're just going to boil it all into a pile and sell it. And you immediately have something that's valuable, which is land. And people don't care about selling parts or making milk or being a farmer anymore. Those descendants of the people who started it, they see the money and they want out quick.
Yep. And then that gives them the opportunity to maybe start their own thing. That's just seed money.
Exactly.
Large seed money, we could all sit here and ponder on all the things and the great creations of industry we could come up with if we just had enough seed money to start out. And at the end of the day, you talked about, well, if that fire comes, burnt metal is still metal. And metal has its own value, and you can scrap all that. So you're getting checks from 3 different directions. It's not unheard of to... Well, you can't blame that person, right? Like, I don't want to call this person like, oh, this is such an evil act, but it's an understandable act. It's understandable that if you're put in that situation, you may want something better or different for yourself, and stuff happens. I mean, it just, there's always a brighter side to it. I would like to talk to some of these people that own these salvage yards personally. I mean, it's a hard, jaded opinion to say, yeah, I think these people are burning their own salvage yards to get ahead. But at the same time, follow the money. I want to talk to the person and say, are you worse off now than when you started? Or are you collecting checks? I mean, it's hard to, point the finger at the little guy. But at the same time, it's also hard for me to go, why do I want to believe the conspiracy that big business is somehow trying to take over an industry that's always existed for, the 100 years it's been out there, and now all of a sudden big industry says we can't have that. We could reproduce everything, but we can't have this guy selling it anymore. We can all act like there's value in the things we collect and have, but the reality is once somebody can repop it, the value starts dropping really fast. And we can say it's original, but if the newer version is made better than the OEM or original option one, you're just only grabbing the OEM one because you want it to be original.
Yeah, and I think to that degree too is which we mentioned was that when that third, fourth, whatever generation comes along, and maybe they got this great big farm, and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to run this great big farm. It runs at a loss. I can't handle these 300 acres, and all of a sudden the city's moving in. And all of a sudden, a developer comes knocking on your door. Now, whether you're a farm or whether you're a junkyard, that developer's going to come along and say, look, I'm willing to give you $500 an acre or $10,000 an acre. I don't know what the property's worth, but just because they want to redevelop that and throw buckets and buckets of cash at you to entice you, like no matter what that cash value is, if they're willing to pay it, there's more on the table.
So I'll give you some actual numbers on that. So in Iowa right now, in the county I live in, an average acre of farm ground is anywhere from $11,000 to $23,000 sold. And that is farmable land. That means you don't got to do nothing. You just buy it and you farm it. Now that's farmable land. If you have land that's set up to actually build a house on or set up in a housed area or for development, I've seen ground, depending on the location, just in this area where we're not rich people around here, I've seen just a 5-acre plot go for $150,000. So it's not unheard of to have these crazy numbers. So if you're sitting on a junkyard that's, 130 acres, depending on where it sits, there's millions of dollars in just soil under your feet.
Yeah.
And you still get to sell your junk.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and people just go, well, this is a huge problem. I don't know what to do with it. And now all of a sudden there's a fire, and everybody involved goes, whoopsie.
Yep. Yeah, and really, who's the victim, right?
Oh, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. Is we looked at it from the side of, is this government conspiracy? Is that a plausible thing? And I think that to some degree, without putting the tinfoil hats on, I think we all can agree that, is the government trying to keep us from keeping our old, unreliable, inefficient, polluting cars on the road? Are they trying to end that? I think so. And I don't even think they even deny it. But they're trying to put more efficient vehicles, safer vehicles, with this whole new, we can shut your car down if we feel like you're under the influence, or maybe you stole this car, we could shut, whatever, all that stuff. Everyone wants to get on the the government conspiracy theory bandwagon, when in fact it may be totally different, and it might be something more along the lines of, I grew up in this business, I worked it as a kid, in my younger adult life, I worked it, I hated it, and at the first sign of somebody flashing money in my face, I'm hitting the road, right? I think there's probably just as much of that, if not more, than government conspiracy. Not everything's a conspiracy, folks, but being able to talk about this stuff and seeing some of those other ways of looking at it. Back to the salvage yards, James, you mentioned about if there's an accident, whatever that accident looks like, and the place burns, metal is still there. Metal itself still has scrap value. I don't know about in Iowa, but around here, scrap is somewhere around $1.25 a ton, I think. So
$1.25.
$125 a ton.
I'm like, wow, that's
sorry, Canadian slipped out there for a second. So you get an average sedan, you're going to get $300 out of it.
Yeah. Well,
right?
and around here, they dock you for everything. They dock you for interior, they dock you for tires. Well, that's gone now. Fire took care of that. So you're getting actual like scrap shred steel cost.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's have you been involved with anything that for sure this is something you can say
well, and that's
possibly
just it.
happened?
Or
is this just something that popped into your brain and goes, oh,
whenever I hear this, because I've been sent these videos multiple times, being in the car community, somebody says, what do you think about this? And you guys' video wasn't the first one that brought this conversation up. So I had kind of had it multiple times. And like I said, I just draw the opinion from things I've personally seen, and I related it to farming because I've seen enough of that to know what generations can do to a family farm. And I think it reflects directly to what generations can do to a family-owned salvage yard. I mean, if those cars have been sitting in there since the 60s and 70s and 80s, the people that put them there are long gone. So, the reality of what that person and their intentions were when they started that salvage yard is a little different than the new generation. We can all look to the eccentrics. We can all look to the hoarders, if you will. I'm one of them. I enjoy cars for a lot of personal reasons. And I can't sit here and explain that to anyone. I can't justify it to anyone either. There's a lot of people that are going to look at me and be like, you're kind of nuts. And I'm going to go, you're right. There's no justifiable reason to have the things I have and collect the things I collect. But, they're not dolls. They're not golf clubs. It's my thing. I respect other people's things. I don't have any, ill will against anybody that just collects whatever they collect. Now,
like Hot Wheels and toys. And
yeah, we all have our things. So you got to understand the originality of a lot of vintage salvage yards in my mind. It's because somebody's collection just got too large. They had to create it into something because just like you said, the county, the city, the state, they started coming in and saying, hey, you can't have this. So you got to call it something so we can let you stay where you are. Even in our community, you can collect as many farm tractors as you want. And you can put them on across fields. And the state and the city says, well, that's ag. We don't care. But if you start rowing cars up, if they can see them, it doesn't matter where you're at. That starts looking like a salvage yard, and the county, the state will come in and remove it for you. So you got to be very mindful about how you store things and put things and arrange things and follow all the rules, because, oil from a car is bad for the soil, but oil from a tractor is fine. So we all got to
Wow.
follow these rules that, we don't always agree to.
We've talked about it a lot. I put my oil right back where it came from.
Yeah.
All the time. It came from the ground. What's the difference?
But only in the gravel pit down the road, not in my backyard. I would.
No.
Yeah.
So, James, I appreciate the input on that topic, and I think that it sheds a little bit of light to some other people who maybe they are the tinfoil hat wearing type. But moving forward, I also wanted to touch base a little bit to find out your perspective. You seem very knowledgeable, not just on older cars, but car history and stuff like that. As we move forward with the technology, with some of these new rules and privacy issues of scanning faces and stuff like that, and where do you see this technology going? How far do you feel like this technology today of not just self-driving cars, but the car being able to see you and read your face and see how tired you are, or your driving abilities, and sending that to the insurance company? Like, do you really feel like this is a rabbit hole that we cannot turn away from?
Well, and I definitely not to draw a line between rabbit hole and reality, and I think we're already there. There's enough cars that it's pay to use your heated seats now. You have a lot of different weird mechanisms that have been created that are pay to play, and they want to monitor and babysit everybody in their vehicle, and they always have. That's just been steadily getting worse. And the fact of the matter is, I do find it kind of crazy that we still build a brand new Dodge Hellcat with a 700 horsepower motor, but then we also build a car that gets mad when you blink too much. So I don't know where the line gets drawn in horsepower and fun, and we know you're going to do maybe not so legal things in this, and we don't want you to nod off or look away from the road or maybe look at your dash too much. In this state, we just recently got to making laws against touching any electronic device, cell phone or dash or anything like that. If you get caught driving, it's a $125 fine for just not being aware of the road. And that's up to the, what the cop saw at the time that it happened. You could be like, I wasn't touching my phone, and they'd be like, prove it. So we are getting to a world where everything's babysitting us, everything's looking at us. Now, to that point, I look at it as worst case scenario. At some point, you're going to just be the person that just opens the app, calls the autonomous car. It's going to show up. It's going to take you to where you want to go. You're going to play on your phone the whole time. Driving is just going to be a thought that Grandpa used to do. And I don't want to see that, but I see industry pushing us in that direction, because with all of this mechanical monitoring, that's just a way to prove that you're not capable of driving your own car safely anymore. And once they push it into the idea of safety, and we can prove that, well, we're saving all these lives because, the cars drive themselves, until we have a catastrophic event to prove otherwise, it's not an argument we can even fight. And that's been the same way with seatbelts, and that's been the same way with airbags, and that's been the same way with, it's hard to fight a battle that we've watched get won over and over and over again. So the reality, like you said, it's not a rabbit hole, it's a reality. And we can fight the uphill battle, but we're just the guy putting horseshoes on a horse at this point. The car will never take my horse. Well, it already did if you saw it on the road. So
yeah, we keep putting it back to the guy who invented the buggy whip. He had to learn to do something else after the car came along. After internal combustion engine was invented. And I always talk to people about, they said, they want autonomous cars, and you call them up, and it's a thing where you don't have to drive, and it just takes you where you want to go. That's already been invented. It's called a train. It's called a bus.
Weird.
All weird, huh? All we're doing is we're just saying it's a different route of money. A different route of money.
A different economic industry, right?
100%.
They're just trying to create.
Where's the money being funneled?
Yep. a new
Yep.
money flow. And
Let's
then
go
it's going to
back.
be, oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
It's just
I
going
was
to be a
just
new money funnel on how much money do you have for the fancier ride, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if we go back to, I don't know when it came out, the original Wall-E movie, the Pixar, where they're on the spaceship that they've been sailing on or whatever for years and years, and everyone's big and fat, and they're stuck in their chairs, and that's how they get around. And near the end of the movie, they realize they can get out of these chairs and actually walk around and get away from that technology. Like, are we going to get there? Are we going to get to a point where we just say, you know what? We've grown up in a generation where we want to get behind the wheel. We want to feel how our vehicle drives. We want to feel the power. We want to bang the gears, all that stuff. And we're losing that generationally to the point where our kids, our grandkids and great grandkids, they may never get their license. They may never drive. They may just, like you said, app it, think it, see it, get in it, takes you where you want to go, and maybe never own a car. But instead of paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a brand new car every couple of years, you're paying that in subscription fees to take me to work, or subscription fees to take me to the non-existent, I can't even say malls because they don't almost exist now, but I think that we're heading down in the car industry at the very least of a point where our grandkids aren't going to be able to experience what we experience today with getting behind the wheel and feeling how bad our 60-year-old cars drive, and smelling the raw fuel and the burnt tires and the burning oil and the exhaust. I think that'll be gone in the not too distant future. What do you guys think about that?
Well, Jason, hurry up and go get the domain Get Out and Ride. We're gonna need that, because you won't be driving anywhere with the future story you've implanted in my brain. So,
Well, and I think there's also a bigger perspective, at least in America for me. In Midwest, and I always say this, in Iowa, there's roughly 3 million people living in Iowa at any given time. Everything's rural, realistically. There's bigger cities, but not comparable to anything that's a real city. And everything has to be, you travel. You get in a car, you travel, you have to live that life. Now, if I move to Chicago, there's 8 million people in Chicago. There's more than double people in one city than there is in the entire state of Iowa. If you look at that, most of those people don't know how to drive. They don't have a license. They have no interest in driving. There's public transportation. So you look at the perspective of the masses, the population that just doesn't care. So to them, it's just like, why do you need a car? I get on the train. Well, I can't get anywhere in the state of Iowa without my own mode of transportation. I mean, if I want to take the bus and get there in a couple of days, maybe, you know. And I think that's perspective to keep too. And I think you made the perfect comparison with what you said, Jason. When you start talking about subscriptions, we can all look back and honestly go, I used to go and watch movies. I used to buy DVDs. I used to buy VHSs. I used to have a Blockbuster. I could go rent them and give them back. I didn't even get to own them. And we all looked at that as an expense, but it was an acceptable expense. And then now we pay for streaming services. And I don't know about you, but it's getting to the point where it's not an acceptable expense anymore. I mean, you don't even get good things to watch. You still got to pay for your movies, but now you can do it from home. You don't even got to leave. And I wish I could still just go to a Blockbuster and just get a movie for $2, bring it home, watch it, and give it back. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to buy it for $10 on a 20-year-old movie or pay for some service to watch it twice and then get stuck with nothing else to see, but I'm still paying the bill.
Yeah, and now we're at a point where we've got to pay an extra $2.99 to get that same service without freaking commercials.
Yeah, which
Right?
is why it was created to begin with, right?
And that was the selling point. Oh, Netflix, it's $7.99 a month and no commercials. You can just skip to whatever part you want. Yeah, right. Anyways,
I have a little bit to add.
go ahead, Paul.
My son works at a company where they actually have a benefit to pay for Lyft or Uber almost daily.
Wow.
Yeah, it's part of their benefits program.
Wonder if they're invested.
If it's any consolation, boys, I know I live rurally, and you mentioned Iowa has 3 million people. I live in New Brunswick, Canada, which is maybe a little bit smaller geographically than Iowa. We're still less than 1 million people. In fact, we don't have Uber or Lyft or rideshare programs here.
Yep.
My small community of the greater metropolitan area of the town that I live in is maybe 5,000 people, maybe 25,000 rurally. We don't even have a taxi. We don't have buses. So we have what's called dial-a-ride, which is generally restricted for the elderly. If you need groceries or you need this or that, you go and you call dial-a-ride. They come to you and take you grocery shopping, or they do your grocery shopping for you. Somebody of my age, at the ripe old age of 50, if I needed a hand, I'm stuck. I got to do it myself. One thing that COVID brought around was the ability to order everything online: groceries, pharmaceuticals, beer, wine, whatever, cigarettes. You just punch it into an app on your phone. They bring it to your door, drop it off. See you later. All on an app. Zero human interaction. I kind of like that, but every now and then, something about talking to somebody, having a conversation. How was your day today, sir, Mr. Corner Store guy, who's been here for 30 years, right? Or you're pumping gas and you're talking about the weather to the guy beside you. I don't know. Old school, I think we all can agree. We probably all feel very similar that we liked the way things used to be a while back. And we're of the get off my lawn age now, that we just don't want to see the change in the technologies and the wave of the future. We used to make fun of our parents for talking like that. Here we are.
Well, and I don't want to speak into grand conspiracy when it comes to COVID, because you said it, so I'm gonna follow up on it. But I don't think it was a conspiracy per se. You can have your own viewpoints on COVID, or where we got, how we got, whatever. But what we ended up with is important. And I think, to point out, it forced everybody into this online lifestyle. And, me, myself, I'm part of the problem. I stopped going into the Walmart. I just go get my things. I pick it up. I don't want to go in there. And I'm not helping the scenario, right? So I'm just becoming part of that problem, as much as I want to be cantankerous and I say, I don't want this and I don't want this moving forward. I do find myself with the convenience factor and just going, you know what? I don't want to go in that store. I don't want to deal with people. And I think we're all leading in a direction where that's going to be the downfall of everything. And I don't think COVID caused it. I think it was happening either way. I think it just escalated it quickly. And it just gave everybody a reason to say, nope, this is the way we should be doing it. And now there's no turning back, right? There's no going into that corner store and talking to the guy that's been there 30 years and having that good conversation and getting that good customer service and quality service. And then even with self-checkouts and things like that, I went into multiple stores multiple times where they put the worst person on a register just because they wanted to force you in to go check out your own groceries. And I'm one of those stubborn people that just wants to say, I don't care if I have to wait in line and watch everybody be angry. You're not paying me to work here. It's not an inconvenience for me to stand here and make you do your job. So,
Right.
That's my opinion.
That's exactly right, and that's how Jason and I kind of mesh together. Is Paul is like 5 minutes physically from my house, and Jason is what are you, Jason? 3,000 miles away or something. It might as well be. But I'm in St. Louis. There are millions and millions of people here, and Jason lives in a place that I don't know. Do you have paved roads, Jason? We always we always laugh about that stuff, but I know he has telephone and indoor plumbing. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, bougie. But but how we see our lives is completely different. He is still small town, and I don't know what that's like at all. And you being in Iowa are still quote unquote small town. I don't know what that's like at all. And I think having that viewpoint from a large city, Chicago, New York size city being St. Louis, gives me a good viewpoint of how I see people treating. They're narrowing down all of our streets to 2 lane, and they're putting in bike lanes everywhere. Everything is a bike lane. Everything is a bike lane everywhere. And they're ripping out railroad tracks all over the place. And they're trying to make Southern Illinois, Southern Missouri, Joplin, bikeable next to Highway 44 all the way up to St. Louis. And they're damn near complete with it because they're ripping up the railroad track that was right next to Route 66. And they paint it green and they put a bicycle sign on it. And now it's a bike lane. There's money. There's a money trail behind that, guaranteed, somewhere. Somebody that's the prior owner of that, which was the railroad, they're getting paid a lot.
Well, that's John's food for thought to end out this episode. Mine is going to be, John and I have shared several road trips together, and the time that we were coming through St. Louis, I was driving, and John says, look, I've only got one tip for you. Driving through St. Louis, it's like, I don't know if it's the murder capital of the world, but it's certainly a crime capital to some degree. He's like, when you pull up to a stop sign, just don't make eye contact with the car beside you. If there's somebody panhandling, just keep your eyes straight, right? Somebody rear ends you in the back, just keep going.
Don't out.
Don't stop. Don't get out. Again, rural, innocent, don't drive in big, like our biggest city here in New Brunswick is barely 100,000 people. And that's, and down there, they don't call those cities, they call them towns. So for me to drive through, John, what cities did we drive through coming home from Kansas? We went through, you weren't there, but Kansas City, St. Louis,
yeah.
Indianapolis,
Yep.
Columbus,
Yep.
Not quite Pittsburgh, around Boston. Like, these are some big cities that when you're inner city driving, we had to stop and get gas, and I got stuck talking to some guy about selling t-shirts. But you learn these things. That things where you live are not the same as where everybody lives, and sometimes having that eye-opener brings things into perspective. I say all of that to come back to exactly what we talked about tonight on this episode, is having James's perspective on something that we talked about totally opened my eyes to say, not everything's a conspiracy, which I don't think they are anyways. I'm not that kind of guy, but sometimes when you just start looking at things, and depending on where you're getting your resources, you follow that, like you said, follow the money trail or follow the trail of whatever. A lot of people who are conspiracy theories tend to just follow what makes sense to them. Doesn't mean it's the truth. But I feel like the conversations that we had here tonight, coupled with that previous episode, I hope opens up a lot to our listeners. James, is there anything else that you want to end with to kind of share a perspective or share a story or whatever before we take off here?
I'll end it simply. I'm a big conspiracy guy. I like to read them. I like to give it a good thought and go, what's the reality of this? And I like to do research. I don't like to take things on face value, if you will. Social media, everything can be taken on face value. You could say, guess what I heard, and never look up an ounce of actual information. And I think self-perspective goes a long way. But here's the reality that I live by when it comes to conspiracies. If you think someone is intelligent, well thought out, and capable and has all these intricate ideas that they've been playing off for decades, if you will, to make something happen, you give way too much faith in the intelligence of others. I don't believe in a lot of conspiracies for the sheer fact of I don't think people are mentally capable of coming up with some of this stuff. I think they're capable of thinking that it could happen, but the actual making it happen, I can point out our government as a regular thing and go, these people have no idea what they're doing. They're just flying by the seat of their pants and hoping it works out. So conspiracy always for me gets debunked just by the sheer ignorance of people. And that's where I'll end. Sadly, not sadly, I go to a lot of local car shows, and it is weird. I think you just made a video about this, Jason, where people notice you, and you're in a community where you do videos and people are like, hey, where's the Suburban? I get that same effect when I go to a lot of car shows and everybody's like, hey, can you do the thing? And it's like, what thing? And they want in the middle of a group of people, they're like, do the dudes with wrenches thing. And it's just like, I don't. I've put myself in this situation. I understand it, but it's one of those things where recently I've been like, I feel like I'm a retired content creator. I'm just like, sorry, not sorry, but the dance monkey dance routine right now just isn't going to fly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, make Urkel say, "Did I do that?" one more time.
Well, and that's what the what no way guy. That's what he's going through right now.
Yeah,
Is like I followed him when he was little, like a small influence, barely even whatever, but he just kind of blew up seemingly overnight. Yep. And now he's doing races with Robbie Layton, yep. And all that stuff. So when the announcers were announcing that race, the Laytona 250, they could not say his name because he's got a weird last name. So they would say, well, there's Sean, what no way guy. And then all of a sudden somebody in the background would go, no way. And it's like, he's created that for himself, which is unfortunate. But it's put him on the map. And to some degree, the fact that the what no way stuff is being separated by his actual real content now, and he's starting to stand out with actual real content that he's doing with Justin Nunley, that he's doing with Robbie Layton, and he's coming to my capital city. We have a big car show in August, and he's kind of one of the headliners. And I reached out to him and his wife and said, listen, is it possible at some point that Get.Out.N.Drive could kind of just do a quick little 5-minute interview, just pull them aside and whatever. And they said possibly, depending on the schedule, but very approachable. So I don't know if I mentioned that before, John, but that's a possibility that we made.
That's good. Going on what you just said, very quickly, what is Larry the Cable Guy's real name?
Oh, he's from Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, and he's a nerd.
Oh man,
it's Dan something.
Yeah. Because I thought it was great because I listened to I like him first of all, and his shtick is done so well that everybody thinks that's him. And it's amazing. And I was watching a thing that he did recently, and he said he was on a opening of a Disney cruise line, and they wanted him to be the MC when they were taking off from the dock. And he said, okay, no problem. So they had Mater. They said, hey, everybody, Mater's with us. And he's speaking that way. And then he said, and we've got Larry the Cable Guy. And he said, he's explaining his situation. He goes, I stopped and I'm like, well, how do I differentiate myself? Because Mater is Mater and Larry the Cable Guy is Mater, but I am both of these people and nobody knows who I am. And he said that was a moment in time in his brain, and he didn't know what to do. And it's something he created. He was completely stuck, and it's amazing.
But that's why he's as successful as he is today. Yeah, he created that. Vice Grip is doing the same thing with his kind of guffaw, hickey, backwoods guy. But in person, he's just a dude, just like you and me, right? So
I had the chance of meeting Derek. I would go to the Iola car show like 4 years running. And multiple times he went and did big things there. And I just go there and film cars. I mean, it was a lot of my content. I'd go to one place and get a lot of video. And there was multiple times where my wife's like, you should go up and talk to him and go wait in line. And you'd watch him and you'd watch all the people circus around him, if you will. and just, oh, there's his kids and there's his wife, and just people obsessing over the guy. And I'm not trying to compare myself to him in any way, shape, or form. But there was a part of me that's just like, you'd watch him when he was done filming and getting in, and he'd jump on this little golf cart and he'd go sit by his trailer, and all of his energy just dropped. And, I would be 20 feet away and I'd be like, you know what? He doesn't need anybody else today walking up and saying, hey, man, hey, I just really love your stuff. And I know he loves his fans, but there's got to be a certain time of the day when you're just like, I am done with this.
Yep.
Well, that's fantastic. I know I liked having you on our show. I liked having a different idea of somebody else's viewpoint. So if any of our listeners are out there and they have a viewpoint on any of our episodes previously, certainly go to our website and scroll all the way to the bottom to the listener hotline. You can click that button, send us an email. You can send us on our website. You can send us an email, or you can click that button and you can talk to us and send us a note. Give us your idea. Give us your viewpoint on how your personal ideas around the world, even if you're not in the United States, personal ideas around the world, how something affects you. Love to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, having said that, we'll end on that note with we are done with this.
Cruise on over to our website, Get.Out.N.Drive.com, for all the info you never wanted to know about our podcast. Hit us up on our listener hotline, be the first to know what's happening, get industry news, and grab your Get Out and Drive merch. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on X at Get.Out.N.Drive.Pod.
How about I just
That should be more gooder.
how about I just move in closer?
Good or better?
More gooder, better.
How that?
That's awesome.
So every time I talk, do you want me to lean in like this, or do you just want me to sit here?
It's very intimate.
Like talking to our
Really
grandmother.
seductive.
Grandma, move back further from the camera. All right.